we're really kind of scaling this up to how mass timber can even influence the urban fabric of a city at large too.
We had this idea that there's a hidden axis in Denver, but this hidden axis is really has poor transportation, and it's with a river. So any other forms of subways or anything else like that long term really are not good environmental solutions because of dewatering, the amount of really carbon that would have to go in to create these things. And we realized the minimal impact is a high-speed gondola. And so this would be a route that would just have poles every 300 feet or so and stations, and it could be designed out of mass timber. It's really just sort of a fabulous idea. And the whole time is you're elevating mass transit into an experience where you're floating between buildings. You have the best route. It's better than driving. And you get views of the mountains peeking through structures. Really, it's just a fun idea. We're trying grassroots. It's one of our outreaches to the community to make it better.
This is the Mass Timber Group Show. I'm Nick.
And I'm Brady, and we talk to sustainable building experts. Today we chatted with Tim Politis and Eric Durnbach of One Line Studio out in Denver, Colorado. They've just finished building their amazing new office building out of Dowell Laminated Timber, or DLT. They shared the unique advantages of DLT, their lessons learned, and how mass timber can be used for smaller commercial and residential uses. They're both incredibly passionate about connecting nature with the built environment, and they've certainly brought that concept into reality with this building. We took a deep dive into several of their projects, and I'm excited for you to hear about them.
I still can't get over them keeping under wraps what might be the most exciting mass timber project I've ever heard of. One Line Studio announced their mass timber gondola project in downtown Denver called Stitch, a gondola that is planned to stitch the city together. It runs along Spear Boulevard and Cherry Creek. The concept is to whisk people through Denver's high-rise buildings on a high-speed gondola supported by mass timber columns. I swear, mass timber never ceases to amaze me.
But before we jump in, if you like hearing sustainable building experts share their insights, stories, and experience, please hit that subscribe button. So with that, let's get into it. Well, guys, can you tell us how One Line Studio came to be and how you guys ended up sitting next to each other?
Yeah, One Line Studio was founded approximately 10 years ago. We initially were going to have partners, but it just turned out to be that I started it. And we started with just one employee, and that came soon after. But the real thing was that we were founded around an important significance. There's no names on the title, and that there's also this big idea that the first line you make, whether it's on paper or in thought, is significant, and it directs the projects. It helps it go to where it needs to be. And so we want to put a lot of thought into every aspect that we do, starting with that first line.
Yeah. And that's actually how I got interested in office. I've been part of One Line Studio for about 4 or 5 years now. And when I was wanting to move back to Colorado from, I was living out of state working, I was really kind of searching for a kind of thought-provoking and creative firm. And in addition to what Tim just said about what our name means, the project types that we do here really kind of drew me to One Line in general. And as you can see, our project behind us. So
I just wanted to note that Eric in particular and everybody here in the studio, they are the romantic ideal of an architect. And by that is that people get their training by starting from the very beginning to the very end. You wear a lot of hats. We even take out our own trash. But the idea is that what you do is you want to be involved in it, in creating the details and seeing things through. So you develop your toolkit, and so you're very knowledgeable about how things are put together, whether it be wood, steel, glass, concrete. This all comes from I've once worked when I was in Seattle, working up there for several studios. This one architect, Petra, was a fabulous project architect. And by that, she could work on big concept and she could work on micro details. And it's that whole process of having that toolkit and knowing how things are put together that really makes great architecture and great architects. So that is what we promote in not only in every one of our work, but in trying to mentor talent and bringing the best team together that we can.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. And Eric, you'd mentioned that there was a certain type of project that kind of drew you towards One Line that they work on. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah. It's not necessarily a certain scale, but it's a certain kind of thought toward a project. And it just kind of like taking either small or big ideas and thinking about how that relates to actual details of design. For example, one of the projects we did here was turning an old garage into like a little urban farm restaurant that's in Inglewood, Colorado here. And I thought that was just so thought provoking. And then that idea, once you have that initial provoking kind of conversation, that idea could grow into so many different things in the project. And what I like about our approach is we really do kind of take that creativity and apply it to whether it's even like a back of house kitchen or like kind of a 2-story tall CNC topography, decoration, and so on and so forth with so many different things. So
That's interesting you say that project because that was our first dabble into mass timber. Was on that project. We were actually supposed to have NLT with the nail laminated items and more handmade and handcrafted. In the end, it was kind of a bit of a hybrid and some savings that came from it. But I think it spawned our interest more and more about what could be done with wood in a creative way.
yeah, I would say wood's my favorite, I find the most interesting material. So also why I woodwork in my free time.
Looking at some of your other portfolio on your website, you have several hundred projects that you've been involved with. I'm kind of looking at some cool ones that are notable for the Denver area, like you worked on the tattered cover at McGregor Square, the Denver Art Museum admin building. What are some other like kind of cool and iconic video or projects that you've worked on?
List like Grow and Gather that Eric said that's actually in Inglewood that is kind of a service garage repurposed. Burn Down is a new facility off of Broadway that is it's repurposing old timber that we were able to convince a client to save. And they're repurposing that structure with a 3-story atrium and whole sorts of fun rooftop stuff. We've worked in McGregor Square on probably several dozen projects with the Rockies and in that group. And in each situation, really, we're not looking at project type necessarily, like offices, restaurants, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, each one is sort of unique. Like, for example, they'll throw how do we do an ice skating rink in the middle of our plaza? Or how do we create a wall that actually looks great and is advertising? And we kind of go into it's really focusing on problem solving and excitement about how you can make the environment around you better.
Yeah.
And which, despite the fact that there's many ways to do that, it kind of brings us back to we like things that connect us to our environment, to the outside, to things that create sort of a connection. You can call it biophilic, but really the result is anything that connects you to the environment and takes you out of just being in a box. And the inside is really a huge.
Yeah. And one project I'd like to add to that, and taking that idea, just that kind of an example of a larger scale, is we just kind of wrapped up a 31 unit townhome project in Westminster. And what's interesting about this project is actually it's built on the old shopping mall parking lot up in Westminster. They've created a new master plan for their downtown. So we got the opportunity to help turn asphalt parking into a 31 unit townhome development with like a big, large park. And is kind of a unique project in that way too. So,
Yeah.
Well, speaking about connecting to nature, everybody that's watching this is probably dying to know what's up with the building you guys are sitting in. Can you share with us a little bit about what's unique about this and how you guys ended up building a mass timber office?
Sure. Should we share a couple photos?
Yeah. Sure, we can share some photos, but why don't you discuss while I start sharing some photos here?
So behind us, as you can see, we use mass timber for the walls, the mezzanine floor, and the roof. And it really kind of created a unique space here. Specifically, the type of mass timber we explored, and we did test studies of a few different types, but we were really gravitated toward the alternating pattern of 2x6s and 2x8s. And the most conducive way to get that done in terms of the mass timber world is not done with CLT. NLT is kind of labor intensive and has to be done on site for the most part. Could be done in factory, but we actually want to explore using DLT, so Dowell Laminated Timber. And one of the major benefits of this is that the dowels connect the timber instead of using layers of glue. Is just age-old tradition of putting dowels through the members. None of these dowels are exposed; they're all internal. But it allowed us to have like this really kind of unique, uninterrupted 2x8, 2x6 repeating pattern in the space too. And as Tim and I were talking about today, one of the unique benefits of this too is we get a really strong wood smell in here, which is great.
Yeah, it's that's one thing that's really unique about DLT that we've discovered is that you really just maintain the smell of wood, and which it's not masked by any other product. And you can walk into our studio and you get that smell, which helps to connect you to the outside. And then these fins that are coming up are purposely designed for light penetration and minimize glare, but they also really help to create that tethering to the ground where you have this open landscape, and natural landscape that it kind of reaches up to the sky with those
Yeah.
fins.
And another thing that the DLT has solved for our project is actually acoustics. Our understanding or our kind of like exploration into it, it's not so much the decibel level of noise to an extent, but it's the bouncing of noise that could be distracting, that could like create a less great work environment. But with the DLT, because it's alternating, we just create so many different sound pockets. It just absorbs so much sound and prevents a lot of reverberation that kind of adds like noise pollution of some other spaces of all gypsum board and glass structure, for example. So
I remember.
Go ahead.
Well, I remember going out there, when you were halfway done for a tour. I can't thank you enough. And it was just a stunning build. I've never seen anything like it. And I guarantee that anybody else out there, like this DLT is just such a unique situation where you're sandwiching those 2x6s and 2x8s. Can you talk about a little bit about the process or maybe like the timeline that it took to top out compared to maybe a traditional building? And because you're out at the Denver, in the tech center area, right?
We're right on the south tip of Denver proper, next to the light rails. But it's being the tech center was interesting because you get kind of a mix of environments. It's really much more about the landscape than it is about the urban environment that you would traditionally see kind of in the core of the city. But in the case of DLT, we still had an infill site. And we had challenges in how do you construct these large panels and get them off of a truck and assemble them directly on site without any storage space. So in that respect, it is a very urban project, even though it looks like it's out in the landscape. The one thing that was a little bit, I would say a lesson learned on our part was that we have all this DLT that should have been made construction quicker. And we have all sorts of systems, even the glass is off the structure and you're just standard panels should have been able to happen very quickly. But because it's all considered new and different than standard construction, we struggle to get our GC and the subs to understand the benefits of those time savings. They just couldn't realize that in what the opportunities truly are. Everybody thinks that they're on paper. So what I would say is we discovered through this process that we have to do a lot more hand-holding and encouraging people. And in fact, we were even throwing out ideas this morning that we might actually have to take a point in the project where we take over the reins of being sort of the GC and sort of setting out a schedule and actually talk to them about sequencing and what can be done and pushing the boundaries of this, because there is so much to be had here as an opportunity that could be a savings.
Right.
And there's just a huge amount that can be done. And it's that forethought that I think is really critical, because what we're discovering is you can be as sustainable as you want to be. You can have all the carbon sequestering. You can specify great products that will biodegrade over time or be reused. But the reality is, if you have to redo one thing a second time, you've lost all the benefits and the resources that are saved there. So we're finding that in order to do really great projects with mass timber or any other sort of sustainable thinking, you actually have to be more involved than you would ever imagine and
Yeah.
guide that process.
And to that point, there is a lot of potential with mass timber with smaller scale projects. But what we realized in this process is, yeah, there's a lot of potential, but you need buy-in from the GC early on for the small scale, and you need buy-in from the subs installing the mass timber too as well. But once you get all those pieces moving in unison, there's a lot of potential for it to go on quickly, be efficient, and create beautiful spaces.
For sure. And I couldn't agree more. One of the main pain points that I hear a lot from different architects is finding crews that are local or that can come to the site affordably that are experienced with installing this mass timber. And after we get off, I'll definitely shoot you a list of the installers that we've talked to and worked with that can definitely help you out with that. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you chose DLT over NLT or CLT or GLU-LAM? Why did you go for such what I would consider like a unique mass timber product compared to the just seas of CLT that we see today?
Well, Eric, I'm sure let's both talk about this. The best thing is that if you look at DLT or NLT, the ribbing that is the potential here not only is huge for absorbing sound, but what it really does is it allows you to create chases where you can run things. So what's not shown here in this photo is we actually have hidden ductwork behind the DLT that actually lines up exactly where the joint panels come together. And so there's a slot that's just left open and where that is a diffuser, and it lets air come all the way up here. So what was unique about DLT is because of its ease in fabricating and its undulation, we could actually use it to integrate more things. So the ceiling looks really clean because there's hidden wires that are going up the chase there. And you can see we have like a pulley system that we've developed that allows us to pull these lights up and down and adjust the locations of them.
We have not a single J box in the roof structure, which is extremely unique for a commercial project. All of our J boxes, because the DLT allowed us to do this, are located in the basement. And we ran that wiring up the wall, like Tim just said there. And additionally, with DLT, there's more opportunity to hide expansion joints. We have several expansion joints across the length of this building, but just looking at the wall, you would never see them unless you knew what you're looking for and where to look.
And certainly in like CLT, you can create these chases and these gaps ahead of time and plan this out. But the real issue here is that it's not as forgiving. We live in a world where it's not just that things are a half-inch tolerance and off. Sometimes they're inches or even feet off when we deal with a lot of local construction. And it's not from a lack of trying, just things don't always work out to plan.
Yeah.
But DLT is forgiving.
It is. Like, for example, we had to create a slightly bigger opening for our sliding wall tour here in the conference room. And to go back and kind of close the gap, we simply added a 2x8 that was made out of Douglas fir. So it matched the DLT. It matched the profile of the DLT, but it seamlessly went in as a patch for like this kind of construction issue that popped up. Whereas with CLT, that might have been more difficult to kind of hide that remedy.
So one thing we discovered is that even though we're using tried and true materials, wood has been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Concrete, steel, maybe newer, but it's still been around for ages, and glass. And just using these 4 core materials, of all of them, wood is the most forgiving. It was the easiest thing to work with, to solve problems with. Almost all of our challenges came from tying in the other systems.
Yeah, how the wood connects to like the steel or et cetera. So
we also learned, and this is a great photo to describe this on the roof panels, when they laid the wall panels in vertically, there's a tolerance of a 1/2 inch. And then they came back and they laid the steel beams that are the window supports on the right and the steel columns, and those are a 1/2 inch off. Well, that's great, but we had designed a 1/2 inch tolerance for the ceiling panels, But when those roof panels came in, we were short. And the reason is because if you take a ½ inch one way and ½ inch the other way, but they're both going towards each other, you're now off an inch. And so we had to convince the wood installers not to cut up in the sky and figure out ways to trim things down where they could control it and fix the situation. This is where I say wood is forgiving. But it's something that we never realized how precise things need to be sometimes. And that even when you're working with intolerances, things can add up in a way that you didn't quite anticipate.
What would you do differently if you had to do it over again?
Well, honestly, doing it over again, I think we would have hit the brakes a little bit more in the design process and really, really encouraged the GC and the sub that was doing the installation of the wood, as well as like the steel sub and the glazing sub, and everybody who's pretty much trade intersects with, really taking a step back and doing more pre-con meetings with them and really kind of doing kind of scenarios to just dial in the approach, make sure everybody's bought in on the same page, and that we could even maybe find potential issues before that wood's up on the crane and it doesn't fit exactly into that spot. So
one thing, and this is a little bit of project history, we'd started this 7 years ago, trying to work with a nonprofit across the street that does camps. And in that process, we reached out to a lot of really great people, but we struggled to find somebody who could produce mass timber for us. And we had to search not only North America and all the councils that can help do this, but what it was is that people were so busy building high rises and how tall can we get, how much wood can we use, that the major companies that produce mass timber are seeking those type of projects, and they just don't have time for the little guy.
yeah,
And so what we discovered is we reached out to mom and pop shops, and this is where kind of like Siggy's International Timber Frames company came in. It just happened that his goal is local, his goal is small, and it aligned with our goal, which was a unique sort of thing. I don't think we could have done it without it. I wish we could have found Siggy sooner. The sort of ideas and that you can do, for example, like right now, he is creating giant trusses out of mass timber and doing the most beautiful creative details with it. And if we had had the ability to brainstorm together early on, I could only imagine. Some of the things we learned along the way is that even working with established structural engineers like KLNA, who are so renowned in the industry, that we've learned that we have to ask better questions. They were trying to save us a few $1,000s, let's say, on a study that would have analyzed every structural component in the building and tested the kind of presumptions and sort of prorated ways that you're supposed to meet the code. And we didn't know that even existed, that they could have gone a different way of modeling it. And come to find out that several $1,000s in savings initially probably cost us at least that much or more in materials and stuff. But what could we have developed if we had known that you could have used less wood, less materials, less all the way around? And I think those are things that we've probably learned, is to just ask more questions, delve into what everybody's passionate and good about, and just kind of go deep and make sure that they are aware of the fact that we're looking for something creative. We're looking for something new, something that maybe not have been thought of before, not just because we want to turn a new wheel and do something different, but it's just the fact that you want to do something that is the right solution for that project.
right. And that applies for even small scale projects like our office, for example, too, is we really want to next time emphasize front load the thought in the process during design, et cetera, and just kind of really push the envelope there. So,
one final little note on this topic. If you ask my wife going through this, if we'd known what we were going to get into, we may not have ever tried. But the reality is naivety is a beautiful thing, because it really leads you into ways of new directions and discoveries that, and now we can look at our clients in the eyes and say, believe me, I know what you're going through. It's painful, but look what you can do. And if we can't explore, how can we expect our clients to explore.
Yeah, those are great takeaways for sure. Now that you've gone through the process of working with mass timber, DLT, you've talked about that focus or that applicability in smaller projects, whether it's offices or residential use, where do you see your focus moving forward? How can you use what you've learned to help bring more mass timber projects to life?
Well, I think it'd be great if we get the Colorado timber industry involved with like sustainably harvesting forests or planting new forests, specifically for like kind of smaller scale projects to begin with, and that could grow into larger timber towers here in Denver, Colorado Springs, or wherever. So I would love to see it go that direction and just kind of, really explore what it means to use mass timber at a smaller scale. Because for the most part, it's unpublicized, like less half of a market in the relatively new world of mass timber.
To add to what you're saying, I think it's just being creative with the commodity.
Yeah.
It's trying to push the limits of it, whether it's using smaller timber pieces to still get the lengths and the heights that you want and finding ways to structurally do that, to how do you create more interesting spaces with it? How do you solve more problems with one component? And I think there's just so much opportunity with it. We're looking at it from not only the micro down to the detail of how you route wires through things, but to how could you use similar type products to create things like our gondola project that we're looking at for Cherry Creek here in Denver.
Well, luckily and thankfully, actually, I know we spoke about this for just a few seconds. We're right at the horizon of starting something here in Denver with the Gates Family Foundation. They're spearheading a mass timber, a Colorado mass timber coalition to do just that, to bring awareness, to figure out what the landscape of Colorado forests look like, and just to bring mass timber into more of the forefront of people. And so that's kind of exciting times and unfolding right now. Let's please speak about this gondola, because we just found out about it. And I got to say, it's one of the most, I'm not going to say unique again, because it's not, it's just an unbelievable feat that I think you're after. And you're talking about starting grassroots and getting this thing going. But please, let's talk about the Denver gondola, or however you're titling it.
So we've talked a lot about the small scale mass timber, but we're not limiting ourselves as an office. We're really kind of scaling this up to how mass timber can even influence the urban fabric of a city at large too. So Tim, I'll let you take it away with it.
Well, we had this idea that there's a hidden axis in Denver, and that's it goes along the Cherry Creek, but following Spear, and it connecting what we'll call low high down to Cherry Creek north and all the way down to 9 Mile, really. But this hidden axis is really has poor transportation, and it's with a river. So any other forms of like subways or anything else like that long term really are not good environmental solutions because of dewatering, the amount of really carbon that would have to go in to create these things. And we realized the minimal impact is a high speed gondola. And so this would be a route that would just have poles every 300 feet or so, and stations, and it could be designed out of mass timber, but it's the whole idea about how it connects to the ground and how you take a park like the space around Cherry Creek in the whole path there and go vertical with it, so that these platforms that make stations actually are vertical parks, and there's bridges that connect across and really create this urban forest, in a sense, or urban park that stitches the entire city together, and all that's available transit, bike routes, pedestrian routes. It's really just sort of a fabulous idea. And the whole time is you're elevating mass transit into an experience where you're floating between buildings. You have the best routes, better than driving, and you get views of the mountains peeking through structures. So really, it's just a fun idea. We're trying grassroots. It's one of our outreaches to kind of the community to make it better. And we're excited where this could go, both as a solution to help make our city better, but also to consider how mass timber and it can be used to kind of create this idea.
Well, it's stunning. I mean, like it's just a really, really exciting project. For people who don't know, like where Denver is, or I mean, I guess not where Denver is, but where that section is, like Spear and connecting to Lodi, there's a beautiful little creek next to the Spear Highway that borders that highway. There's high rises that go around it, and I can just picture it like any gondola or chairlift, and you're just cruising through the city,
Yep.
but at whatever, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 feet high, whatever the mass timber poles are. And I think that this can be a reality. And so we talked a little bit about this. There's these grants like shoot, do you remember what the grant was called, Brady? It's just escaping me right now.
The Wood
Wood
Innovations.
Innovations grant is one of them, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars are being pushed into people's laps, just like you, forward thinking people who are trying to reimagine cities and reimagine just landscapes. And so I'm super excited to push that forward. Do you have a name for what this is called yet?
I think we've settled on the stitch temporarily.
Temporarily, yeah.
Because it literally is like it's stitching through the city, as opposed to, like a hard line or anything like that. And here's the added bonus. We've actually got somebody, Hogan, who is going to University of Colorado in the urban design school. And he's been interning with us and helping us gather information. But we've determined that it's actually faster to take a gondola than it is to drive from Colorado Boulevard to downtown. So this has got a huge potential, not only stitching the city together, but actually being a huge benefit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll get you connected to Todd Gardner. For the listeners out there, that's the new Colorado regional rep that's taking over for the U.S. Forest Service, that took over Laura Wolf's position. That is in charge of like the region for like grant writings and giving out the right amount of money to the right people. So we'll get you pushed to the front of the line as much as we can.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. We'd love to get this idea out there and built.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So coming up with all these incredible ideas and working on these new projects, and before we started hitting record, you talked about this concept of bouncing ideas back off and drawing on the collective experience of multiple architects across multiple stages of their career. So I imagine that doing these projects is going to cause your office to grow a little bit. Can you tell us about your future plans there?
Well, I know that sounds interesting. We initially we kind of like to stay smaller. And by smaller, I mean, we want to definitely have a large enough culture that everybody, you're kind of a large team in a sense of people who are just come with different backgrounds and different ways to bring their perspectives onto the design world, but that you stay small enough where, number one, everybody's family still. And more importantly, though, that you can be focusing on quality, that you can see ideas through strongly from start to finish. And I think that's a critical thing that kind of gets lost as you get too big. So if it means that you have to be a little bit selective, well, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But we'd like to ultimately, it's strange because we don't really seek projects by type. And so if someone came to us and said, hey, we have a wastewater facility we'd like you to work on, you're like, oh gosh, that sounds exciting as a museum. But the reality is it is exciting because you might be solving what appears to be mundane. Something that can be turned really interesting about it, and something that is actually solving a lot of problems and needs. So we actually take on small projects, large projects, and everything in between. And it's really just more, do you have the right ingredients to make great projects? Yeah. And by that is you have to have a team of visionaries, of experts, of a client's willingness to want to be a part of something and make something bigger than what they know and what we all are today. And I think when you have the right sort of people to work with and you enjoy working together, what we're able to do as humans is incredible. So I'd say that's our excitement, is finding people who are passionate about what they do.
And there's something to be said about a studio our size right now, and even the size we want to grow to in the future, is that being the size, we could be nimble. We could solve problems in a creative way that not necessarily a larger firm can at a different scale. So really kind of emphasizing just ability to kind of see these small projects and address issues with them and thinking about them in creative ways is something we value, no matter what the project, like Tim was saying.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you guys are saying. And I'm going to ask a question here in a minute because I'm seeing things slid into this conversation that I think should really be pulled out and summarized. And so I'll do that by asking the questions. What are your guys' leadership styles? What are you looking for when you grow a team, when you grow an office, when you build that community? How do you guys lead from the front?
It's interesting. Sometimes leading from the front means leading from behind and shepherding. What I would say is we would be foolish if we didn't start with just listening. And you have to listen and do a lot of research and due diligence and kind of really understand what's going on. I would say we do that as part of making the first line. And it's really important to do that. Once we get that, then what you have to do is inspire people and you work with them to develop a vision. So I would say, if anything, even in leadership, you're collaborating, but you have to have a vision and something strong that just unites people and makes it so that the many dozens to hundreds of people that will be working on any given project, maybe even thousands of times, that they have something to work around. If something we could do better, in fact, our subs for this particular project pointed out to us that they wish they could have seen more images of what this was supposed to look like rather than just the drawings. And they wanted to be a part of that vision, which surprised me because you think that that information is kind of being shared through the whole process, and it's not. So we've discovered a whole new role that we have to play to really be leaders, like you're saying, is to really go down to everybody. It doesn't matter who they are on the project and how long they're on it and what role they have.
Yeah.
They need to see the bigger vision.
And then that gets as detailed as like changing how we do construction documents for projects like this. For example, for our next mass timber project we work on in the future, we'll probably incorporate a number of 2D details alongside more 3D axons and even 3D renderings just to show like the visual quality of what we're going for. Like, hey, look, we don't have any J blocks that's on the ceiling. Here's kind of what that looks like in a rendering, et cetera.
Yep.
So knowing that the children of today are tomorrow's leaders, and a lot of people out there want to be architects, aspiring architects, what kind of philosophy would you maybe have given yourself in the beginning, or what kind of tips or tricks would you tell somebody just entering into the industry to get to where you are?
So my answer to this is actually pretty simple, and it only costs $4, but it is getting a roll of trace paper and a pen and exploring your ideas just with that and collaborating and really encouraging collaborating with your peers, potential clients, engineers, contractors, subcontractors, by communicating through sketching or just like writing ideas down. Doesn't have to be good, but and just really don't get overwhelmed by all the technicalities for somebody just starting. So.
I would add to that. I kind of come from a perspective that I didn't know what architects did for many, many years. And I would still say I'm still trying to figure out what architects do, which is a good kind of problem to have because then you don't get stuck on what we do. And I would say that opens up a huge, broad category of what people can bring to the table. I've been kind of blessed to have worked with so many people over the years. And I would say every architect is different. They bring something unique to the table. And I think it's that uniqueness that people bring that makes it so. I know it's maybe cliche, but I would say just be you. Bring you to the table and be the best you can be. Explore that, push it, make yourself better all the time. And whatever it is that you find fascinating and passionate, it drives you, look into it. It'll guide you to where you need to go. I think architecture, if anything, is seeking opportunity.
Yeah.
And finding opportunity.
Right. And architecture as a profession has a need for a diverse range of like skill sets and qualities, et cetera. And I'd like to make a correction. Trace paper doesn't cost $4. I think it's more like $18.
Well, those are all great answers. shifting the conversation maybe from people getting into the field to people that are already established, but they're eyeing mass timber. They haven't quite taken the jump yet, or they're looking for those new innovative things that you guys are working with. Is there a book, a podcast, a show, a conference, a resource, or something that you would point people that are interested in this type of work to, so that they could maybe take a little bit off that learning curve?
So what really kind of catapulted me into like getting more detailed or more interested in specific types of construction or wood, for example, was during college, I was given the opportunity to do a design build studio class. And what this means is like, as a studio of like 12 of us, we actually did a design for a small town. I went to college in Kansas. We did a design for a small town in Kansas for like a pool structure for them. But we went through the design process and we were actually responsible for building it through like, we were very careful about how we put stuff down on paper because we had to think, like, how are we going to build this? And so kind of like getting our hands dirty, so to say, and actually getting out there and building it really kind of was an invaluable experience. And to this day, like I kind of take that mentality, like I'm always kind of doing little plot studies with my little garage CNC or something like that. Or even like on the weekends, taking welding courses just to get better at learning how like materials can come together and like the importance of craft. So I guess if I would recommend to somebody else that's kind of interested in even mass timber or something specific, is just take an opportunity to explore it more like in a physical setting, like actually go for it, build with it.
Um, I kind of come from the perspective that you have to understand the potential of the wood and everything you're doing with the potential of what it is. I think working in a shop is fantastic. You're seeing how things go together. How hard it is to get things to go together is really kind of the more the discovery that happens there. But I do think there's
The hardest part is getting everybody on the same page, like how things go together.
for sure. I'd say in general though, there is in the Northwest, there are some architecture firms that are before mass timber really became a thing, really focused on how wood, steel, and glass come together. And I think it's understanding those tectonics and how they work. The Scandinavian firms are also really good about that as well. And I'm talking about kind of a late 20th century sort of approach. And I'd say whether you're looking at the Miller Hulls, the James Cutlers of Pacific Northwest, or you're looking at the Alvo Altar and the other great architects of the Scandinavian kind of roots, there's just a lot of potential about joinery. The Japanese have incredible things but I think understanding joinery is kind of important because we can create big things, but understanding how those come together really is important.
Yeah.
But as far as discovery, though, I would say I understand that a lot of times sustainability is a drive in today's age, and it's strong out there. But I find that when you get into it, it's a struggle because what's a positive one thing is a negative in another. And you keep playing this kind of mathematical game is what it's been turned into about what's good and what's bad and what is equates.
Yeah.
And I would say that's kind of a downfall to the long-term sustainability of mass timber and really architecture in this generation. If there's anything that we really need to be doing is thinking outside the box on this and taking it away from simple math equations and realizing the nuances of complex calculations. And by that, the benefits of certain things outweigh others. What's right for one project isn't right for another project. And I think that's the one thing that we've tried to explore in the studio, in particular the construction of the studio, was that what is right here may not be something that will work again in another location. And that's okay. We're actually finding what works for this situation in this moment. And there is all the benefits of sustainability that you can have out there, but sustainability reaches far beyond just the math equation, in the sense that you could be right. You could have a building calculate perfectly, but if it's unusable, or if they had to build it twice, or if it's something that gets torn down in a very short time later, we've lost all the value of that.
Yeah.
We need to look for things that are going to be really long-term, durable, that require minimal maintenance. I like to point out that you can often use sensors these days to turn off lights, and we have watts that we barely use on light bulbs anymore. But how much energy goes into creating the sensors and the equipment that supports it? What happens when those break in a couple of years and someone else has to come out with a drive there in their vehicle, come out, fix it and repair it and replace it, and then new materials? We don't think about all of the energy use and all of the components that go into things. And I would say, in general, simpler is better. And the more we can strive for that simplicity, I think the more you have a long-term viable future.
And while we're discussing kind of sustainability and what that means for mass timber, what I'm particularly curious about is like, how long can a mass timber building last? We kind of talked about in our office, like, it's a solid wood wall. It could be here for hundreds of years. And we kind of designed space to be flexible in the future too. But in reality, like, this building could be here for centuries. And then kind of taking that thought and applying it to like, well, what if in Colorado specifically, we were building houses up in the mountains out of mass timber? Can the outside layer char during a forest fire event and the inside mass timber still have structural integrity? Probably. So it's like, we could also build houses that last like hundreds of years in traditionally fire prone areas. So kind of the potential of just doing a solid wood wall, there's a lot to it.
For sure. Completely agree. And those are all wonderful, wonderful answers. And you guys have obviously put a lot of thought into everything that we've talked about so far. Did you draw any of those thoughts from a mentor? Did you get anything from somebody who might inspire you in the industry? Is there anybody that you could point to that you've learned some significant lessons from?
Well, I know I mentioned Petra as a project architect and kind of that romantic ideal of what architects do. And she worked for Miller Hall at the time. But I would say the one thing that kind of stands out is I once had a course in college about Duchamp. He's an artist that really kind of created from found objects. And I think it's that whole discovery of how do you take what's found, what's in front of you, whatever situation that might be, and make an opportunity out of it, make it art, make it something that is more useful and or reconfigured in a different way. And I think that's definitely been a huge sort of guiding path, a guiding light in kind of my career.
Yeah. Mine's really simple. I attended a lecture when I was in college for the Australian architect Peter Stutchbury, and his kind of thesis of the conversation he had with us was slow down and think. To me, that simplicity add a lot to the project in a big way.
Well, before we ask our last question, where do you want people to connect with you for future projects to be able to work with you?
Oh, well, I would direct them to our website. And actually the cell phone number still goes directly to me. So I'd love to be able to chat with people about their ideas about what they'd like to go with. So,
and we could also share both our email addresses too with you guys if you want to put that in the show notes or something like that too as well. So,
yeah, will do. Well, and it sounds like you're going to have a new website update coming out too recently. So people need to go check out the onelinestudio.com website and see your projects.
Thanks, Nick.
So for our final question, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the industry, what would it be and why?
We actually already discussed it. For me, is just really kind of doing more initial time investment with everybody involved with construction, but before construction happens, just to get everybody on the same page and address issues then.
To bounce off that, I would say it's absolutely critical in our industry that we start to think ahead, plan not just about now and how we put things together today, but thinking ahead and how things go and having forethought about understanding how things sequence, what problems might come up, doing scenarios and really running that, because if we're going to create not only sustainable architecture, but great architecture, spaces that last for generations, we need to have forethought. We need to incorporate everybody in the game. We don't just have builders and visionaries and people that do. We have, it's got to be more collaborative. We got to work together and create something that's bigger than what we have right now.
Yeah.
Well, you blew our minds with the Stitch Cherry Creek Gondola project, and I'm sure that you're not shy now that the One Line Studio headquarters is in the tech center out in Denver. I'm sure if somebody twisted your arm, you'd give them a tour of it to get a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Just some
inspiration
and vision, because it's stunning. I'm excited. I want to go come and check it out here soon when it's done. But it's been a real pleasure, guys, and I'm sure we'll see you around the industry soon. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
And thank you, Brady. Please come and join us. We'd love to see you.
All righty. Cheers.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
So long.